The Navy is apparently stumped over how to make one of its job titles more gender neutral. So it's phasing out terms like rifleman, mineman, assault man, changing them to more gender neutral terms like technician, specialist, professional. Well, that could apply to anybody. I'm a professional, I think. But at issue, the term yeomen, the traditional title for a sailor who works in clerical or administrative positions. The Navy Secretary says the title should be changed to represent the many women who are now taking on that role. Secretary Ray Mabus getting some heat over all of this, but Mabus fired back, telling the New York Times, quote, "I think you ought to have a military that reflects the country it protects, and if we get too separate from that country in a democracy, that's a bad thing. You set standards, you don't lower and change those standards for anybody, and then gender and who you love become irrelevant," end quote. Interesting. What do you think he's trying to communicate there?
You know, I praise Ray Mabus for these changes, and I just don't think he's gone far enough, really. I mean, you think about yeomen. What about a naval petty officer? I mean, how is somebody who has that job going to feel if you're being told that your job is petty?
Oh my goodness! I was like right here with. I was like, wow, where's he going?
I mean, petty means small. It comes from petite.
Stop.
Look, this is so ridiculous.
Don't give him any ideas.
It's like we're not at war. I mean, we are at war. We are yeomen, yo women, yo dudes, yo chicks, whatever you want to call them.
Yo mama.
They have things to be doing that don't involve worrying about their titles.
Yeah.
If you're worried about their titles, you're not worried about the bigger things. Ray Mabus, Secretary of the Navy, should be worried about what the SEALs are doing to bring down terrorists in the Middle East. I mean, they should not. This is just a waste of time, and it's what he makes news on every time he opens his mouth.
You know, it's interesting, Andrea, this is not the first time that women have held these positions. I mean, it's not like, wow, we've got our first person as a secretary in the Navy. So I wonder what's driving this right now.
It's a quiet move by the U.S. Navy to have women start to move into positions within the U.S. Navy SEALs, something that this administration wants to do. You saw women move into the Army Ranger position, and I predict by the end of the year they're going to get their goal. So I think he has this agenda of political correctness handed to him by President Obama, and it's a question of priorities. Time for a man in the mirror moment. I mean, Stephen, you're absolutely right. Our U.S. sailors surrendered and left their weapons in an obvious position of weapons dominance to Iran. Who gave that stand-down order? That should be the question. The U.S. Navy should be worried not about the greening of their weapons plan. That's another thing that Ray Mabus is doing, making sure that SEALs and other officers are making sure they have what? Organic cotton sheets, and that the IEDs are green. I mean, it's so absurd what they are doing to our military.
Well, this isn't the first time we've had...
It is absolutely an abomination.
It's dangerous. We had this conversation about midshipmen, right? They tried the same thing. Our resident Naval Academy grad, Leah Gabriel, talked to her about it, and she said, "Do you know how proud I was to earn that title?"
Yeah.
You know, and knowing its history, and I would think that the same thing stands here. This has been used for 200 years.
You know, it's a little confusing to me. No matter what they call it, the job doesn't change. So as long as they don't change the job, it shouldn't really matter, which alludes to what Andrea is talking about. If you're going to, and we've heard some pushback from members of the military who don't feel that women should become SEALs and on up the ladder, so on and so forth. But I want to ask it this way, just in terms of where we are historically. We don't, you know, change the names of other things when women or others become. I mean, you're still whatever you are if you're a pilot.
Right.
You don't become a pilot woman.
Yeah,
you know, I'm an anchor. I'm being facetious here. I shouldn't be. You know, I'm just an anchor.
Look, the Secretary says he doesn't want gender to be an issue, so he should stop making it an issue. And the women who were successful in joining the Army Ranger program, when you listen to the interviews that they did after they made it, they didn't talk about being a woman. They talked about getting the job done. Regardless, they talked about being a team member. They didn't talk about being a woman. They talked about getting the job done no matter what gender you are. And so if the Secretary, with all due respect, wants to get past the issue of gender, stop forcing it down the throats of everyone and making it an issue, as Steve said, in a time of war.
Well, we found out from the new ISIS video from the Savages that they want to hunt any followers of the cross. They have turned it into a holy war for themselves. That's another thing that perhaps the military should focus on, that new video from this week. Anyway, more Outnumbered in just a moment.